actually starting to grow more rapidly. I'm sure most of you in marketing have noticed the decline over the last few years in print generally and print coverage of technology subjects in particular. So whilst there are some people such as the FT still trying to hold up a flag for the technology industry, we've seen other publications such as The Guardian remove their print technology section altogether and replace that with web-only coverage. So we're in a changing world, and certainly from the perspective of journalism overall, we expect that change to continue. Now, particularly looking at the security landscape, if we could just move on to the next slide, please, Peter, if that's okay. Looking at the security landscape, we have a couple of large media events and general purpose events for the industry coming up, and the ones that I've been asked to mention particularly are the RSA and the Infosecurity conference. RSA, of course, does happen twice a year, once in Europe, once in the UK usually, and once in North America. The Infosecurity conference is based in London, and indeed I'll be covering that as part of the Infosecurity magazine work that I do, because I want to cover off the need to plan ahead, the need to really understand who it is that you're talking to when you try to approach the media around these events, the importance of actually having some news to share rather than something that perhaps your marketing plan thinks might be news, perhaps controversially, but I'm here to present the journalist perspective, so our view of news is not always your view of news. It's famously said that news is something that somebody else wants to suppress. The importance of having an ongoing relationship with the media, and finally the importance of acting quickly. The print production cycle continues to be quite a long one. I have some content appearing in Infosecurity magazine in the print edition, which is for the March cover date, and that copy had to be filed by the end of last year. So a 3-month lead time is by no means unrealistic. That is the lead time the journalist is working to file their copy, so the journalist may be researching their copy potentially as far out as 2 months ahead of that. So all in all, with a bit of forward planning, it's not a bad thing to be thinking about what coverage you want to generate 6 months before that coverage actually will appear on the newsstands or in the mail in people's letterboxes. You can compress those timescales for weekly publications and for daily newspapers, of course, and you can compress that even more for broadcasting, but nonetheless, if you're looking at, for example, in the UK, we have a program on the BBC which is highly rated, a consumer technology program called Click. They don't plan that week to week. They plan that several months ahead. So their coverage, for example, of Mobile World Congress, which is coming up towards the end of February, or the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, which we've just had, they would have been working up to that perhaps even 6 months ahead of time. Have finite resources in terms of time. Journalists have finite resources in terms of time. Be careful who you target. Be quite specific. Understand the different type of audience that they're looking out for, and also the type of story that they're going to be writing as well. So for somebody who's writing a web-based news copy, then yes, a meeting at a trade show is probably quite productive if they can come away with a story and write that up in the next couple of hours. On the other hand, if you're trying to target somebody who's writing for a feature which may be 3,000 words long and won't appear for a few months, maybe actually trying to shoehorn that in during the trade show itself is not such a good idea. Maybe that's a meeting that should be held over breakfast in a hotel, a phone briefing a few weeks beforehand, or as a follow-up. So try to focus on that.
A lot of the time there's, and I think this is where I might actually be different from some of my other colleagues, is that I would rather get upfront what is happening. I would rather know, okay, there is an actual product coming out, there's a new partnership, something upfront, as opposed to saying, hey, we have a significant announcement, is this something you're interested in? What I need is actual specifics. I need to know to see the product, then I can think about whether or not we have to think about a product announcement. So I need to put this in my, when I'm doing a product story, I need some kind of detail to be able to understand whether or not I need to reply at this instant or later on in the day, later on in the week. So it's really a matter of being very detailed.
That competition is pretty fierce. You've got diamond sponsors, which are the, for example, at RSA, which are the top of the top sponsors. You've got big flashy parties. A lot of vendors spend a lot of money, some even renting out whole floors at some of the local hotels next to these events to host their meetings. You're competing with really big industry news, a lot of pre-show noise and news, and all of these things make it really hard to really stand out of the pack. I think the other thing that's really important is that expectations are typically inflated at these events. I think among the executive team and even some marketers, they look at the press list, for example, and see that lots of press and analysts are there, and they think we should have 50-plus briefings. And obviously, that's not very strategic necessarily, and it's definitely an inflated expectation that you have to deal with. Chances are you're already late to the game. This webinar is definitely timely as we're kicking off, the RSA and InfoSec season. But if you're just getting started now, you're way too late. It's really important to get a head start on these events. Some vendors spend an entire year or more planning for campaigns at RSA and InfoSec. I think the key thing is networking. For many companies and in reporters and publications, this is the one time of the year that they'll have the opportunity to do face-to-face meetings. I know in the U.S., reporters these days are pretty geographically dispersed as well as companies. So it's not like you can do a press tour and just go to Boston and another city, for example, and meet everybody. So this is a good place for one-to-one meetings, both to introduce reporters to your spokespeople and your top executives, but also for PR folks like ourselves to reach out to journalists and form a better bond, if you will. For public companies, there's also a lot of financial analysts who typically attend. Some companies do financial analyst days at RSA, for example. Obviously, you'd want to work with your investor relations team on anything related to that. And then also for internal marketing and PR folks, PR agencies tend to swarm the trade floor looking for clients and meeting people. So you might really meet your next PR agency there. Obviously, competition is fierce in this industry, and messages all tend to sound the same. For reporters, it's hard to tell one company from the next. Visibility is key. I wouldn't expect reporters necessarily to spend much time at your booth checking out your brand and your demos, but being there and putting yourself out there builds visibility in an increasingly crowded space. And the last key point on the upside slide here is that RSA and InfoSec are unique opportunities or points in time, I think. They're relatively close together. They typically follow your January sales kickoff season, and they really do provide an inflection point in the year for marketing campaigns and for campaigns for your company to come together.